My favorite science story this week is not my favorite because I'm happy about it. I'm very unhappy about it because I love hockey, I love the NHL, I love watching the playoffs. I get a ton of joy out of that. But it's a big headline, and I think it's worth breaking down. And the headline is that every year of hockey that people play, the risk of brain injury goes up 34%. 34% every single year. And this comes from the biggest study of its kind ever done. It's at a Boston University where they looked at the 77 brains of people who played hockey. So the brain injury specifically is called a chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE. And this is the one that you hear about NFL players getting, also hockey players, rugby players. When you get, actually soccer players too, when they do all those headers. But when you get hit in the head, it adds up over time, and you end up as an older person after your career is over with these problems with your brain, and it's associated with mental health problems. It's associated with increased risk of suicide. It's really a mess, and you can't look for it while people are alive. You have to wait until they've died and donated their brains. So in this study, really, the big take-home messages can be shown really clearly with one graph, and this is it. This is figure 2. The number of years you play hockey and the likelihood that you'll get CTE, it goes up. It's pretty sad, but it's pretty well supported by the data that you get these brain injuries at higher levels if you've played a longer career. That said, I will point out something, that this is not a random sample of players. So these numbers are extremely high in the brains that were donated to the program, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're really high in all players. I mean, think about who donates their brain to a study of brain injury. Mostly people with brain injury or things associated with brain injury to check to see whether that was an issue. It wouldn't be as often that somebody is perfectly healthy when they pass away and then the family says, let's check them for brain injury. But there's one really important piece of the study that I want to get into, which is the thing about enforcers. So it's long been thought that the people who get punched in the face for a living and have their brains rattled by other people's fists probably have bigger issues with CTE, and that's pretty much supported by their data. In the data set, they have 22 men who were enforcers in their hockey career, like it was their job to go punch people if they body checked the goalie or whatever. And of those enforcers, 80% had CTE. 18 out of the 22 had this brain problem. So yeah, it was bad to be an enforcer. What they say in the study, though, is that that's what you expect for anybody who's had a career that long. So because enforcers tended to have long hockey careers, they had CTE just as a result of the wear and tear of the game and normal body checks, not necessarily from being punched in the head. That I don't think that doesn't make a lot of sense to me, and it's only one way to interpret the data. I mean, think about the fact that NHL enforcers die about 10 years earlier on average than the hockey players who are not enforcers. That's a statistic that comes from another study. And it really suggests that there's something different about getting punched in the head for a living. And I think that what might actually be true of these data is that because there are so many enforcers in that older age group, it really drives up the numbers, and that the numbers are artificially inflated by the fact that there are enforcers among the people who had long careers playing hockey. So clearly we need more study on this. Clearly we need a bigger data set, and maybe someday we'll have a technology where we can look for this in people before they've passed away, so it doesn't require the donation of a brain. But the last thing I'll point out is that in women's hockey, the rate of this stuff is about a third of what it is in men's hockey, presumably because there's no body checking. And women's hockey is pretty good to watch. And so there is a path forward where potentially find a way for them to enjoy the game without body checks. And maybe that's not to remove it from the NHL right away, but to set up a side league and see how it goes and see if there's interest. But honestly, I mean, body checks are a fun part of the game, but they're not the best part of the game. The best part of the game is the goals. It's those amazing hands. And when you see Connor McDavid do a little move like that, or Draisaitl, or whatever lesser player you might be cheering for than those two, it's kind of sad to see their bells get rung and to think that they're going to suffer this huge consequence as a result of a great career as a hockey player. It makes me sad. So anyway, this research is important. The headline is pretty striking, but might be supported by the data. And I just wanted you to have that context. So anyway, that's my breakdown of this science story. And listen, it's just one of 5 science stories that I've broken down this week. If you want to know about the other 4, the only way to find out about them is to subscribe to my newsletter. It's called The Bat Signal. Just go to followthebatsignal.com.